So we just lifted to 60, and I tell you what, she's up pretty bloody high. Daisy looks absolutely awesome with the lift kit in, and she's up really high. I know she'll sit back down a little bit when we put some more weight in her, but for now I'm really enjoying this height. Now, here's how we did it.
The first step for taking out these rear springs is to jack up the car.
We there yet?
Not quite. Take the tyres off and chuck some axle stands under the chassis, not the axles.
Yeah.
Yep. Then start undoing the shocks with the bottom bolt on the U-bolt plate and the top on the body of the car. That was easy. I got the bottom off with an 18, but it wasn't working on this one. I just checked and it's actually a 17. So the last one must have been really rusty for that to work.
The shocks were Tough Dog and the springs were King, so both pretty reputable brands. No matter how reputable though, 30 years has taken its toll.
You're getting there. It's not as graceful as mine was, but you're getting there.
Oh, look at that, look how f***ed he is under there.
I'm loosening the nuts on the bottom of the U-bolt so that we can take the springs off. Once those 4 U-bolts are loose, move to the rear shackle and then the front pin. There's a little retaining bolt in the pin that can come out easily. And finally we can get rid of those U-bolts fully and the spring should pop itself away from the axle.
Jesus. Axle off leaf.
Rip the U-bolts and the U-bolt plate off and repeat on the other side. Make sure to keep the plate, then figure out how to get the shackle out of the spring. Oh, this whole plate comes off. We had to call for reinforcement.
Do you want to side the nut or just bash it?
Just bash it. There you go.
Yeah. Oops. Yep, that's come out. We did that in probably less than 5 minutes.
Before we pop the new suspension on, we're going to take advantage of the car being jacked up and we're going to clean and paint the chassis. But for now, I'm going to fast forward to putting on the new suspension. So now that the rear half of the chassis is painted, it's time to put the suspension back in. We've got this lift kit from Fulcrum Suspension. We've got EFS leaf springs, KONI shocks, and then all sorts of brands to match. We've got the EFS greasable pins and shackles. We've got these Super Pro bushes that go on the leaf springs, and I don't even know who makes these U-bolts, but we've got these U-bolts. So I've started the suspension on the passenger side while I've been working things out. I'll be using the very small amount of silicone grease that they supplied to us in the packet. I don't think you can go wrong by having too much grease, but I just don't want to run out of what's in the packet. Once you've done that, make sure the inside of your leaf spring here is clean, and then they should just slide nicely in. That wasn't too difficult. And now we're just going to do the same thing on the other end of the spring and in the spring hanger mount. You'll also be wanting to grease this pin, only up to the thread, don't get it on the thread, and same with the shackle mount. So now I'm under the car, which might seem a bit weird given you can access the springs from the outside. Zave is out and these springs are very heavy and a very tight fit. So while it's probably possible as a one-person job, I'm going to save myself the hassle and wait till he gets back and can give me a hand. For now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hang my shock absorbers from the top mount. On the last one I did, I found out that it was way easier if I hammered on the first of the bushings and then slid the shock onto that. These bushings, they don't need any lubrication, any grease. They're designed to go on dry. If you put on grease, I believe just dirt gets caught in it and it makes everything worse rather than better. And I'm only hitting those rubber bushings, not the shocks themselves. Also, these KONI shocks are adjustable, so you can adjust them for a softer or firmer ride. I've started these on the softest setting, and over time, as they sag, you can take them off, adjust them 180 degrees, and they should just get a bit firmer each time, and just bring the car back to life. Alright, Zave's back now, so we can actually put the springs in.
Slide forward.
Now, this axle stand here is getting in the way of us being able to wriggle the springs side to side. So we're just going to jack up the car from the diff and then we should be able to take that axle stand out. We couldn't fit the other jack stand back under next to the spring.
Anyway, let's get the spring up. So now at least if it falls, it just lands on a spring. Whoops. Alrighty, so front's pretty good. Get that second bush in on the back. Oh, which is falling in the dirt.
Oh, not again.
So it's important not to get dirt in the grease. It just acts like sandpaper on your bushes, which is not very nice.
Not again.
Kidding me?
Yeah, it might need a bit of force.
Yeah, it's first trying with the mallet. God, one end goes in, the other end comes out. There we go. So for now, we'll just finger tighten everything. Now we have to line up the axle with the new springs.
Is the other side anywhere near aligned?
No.
Okay.
3, 2. Oh.
The springs don't
Hang on, it moved a little bit. It's so close, it's like half a centimetre off.
Okay.
Alright, one last go.
Okay, all your might.
Alright, and then if this doesn't work, we'll have to actually give it another go. Give it a big push. Big push, ready? Got it.
Really?
Yeah.
Really got it?
Really got it, we're on. After that battle, the U-bolts slot over the axle into the U-bolt plate. Do them up tight, like really tight. Then do up the bottom of the shock, and that's the rear suspension done. Then the front. The front shocks come off by undoing this top nut while you hold the shock still. Undo the front sway bar too, it'll give you more room to get the springs out. The bottom shock bolt is just like the back and shouldn't put up too much of a fight. So in the original plan for this video, I wasn't going to show you how to take the front springs off. That's because it's exactly the same as the back, at least in theory. But it's been about 3 days and I've just managed to get the passenger side off since the rear shackle is so completely stuffed and rusted into the bush, you can't take it out with a sledgehammer. So I'm going to show you my method of removing a stuck shackle pin. So first you want to bash the spring over just so you can expose a little bit of bush or a little bit of metal. If you can only see bush, you're going to need to get your butane torch and melt the bush out. Now once you've melted most of the bush out, you can then hit it with your grinder. Luckily for us, this grinder is just big enough to fit in the shackle mount and cut through the pin with just some minor difficulties. Then with one side done, we pretty much repeat that process on the other side and it should fall out. Obviously this won't work if you want to reuse your pins or your bushes.
Now, I'm just going to explain shackle angles really quickly before I throw this spring on. This is a vertical shackle, and that's not a good thing, because your shackle is meant to be sitting somewhere over here, right? About 45 degrees. Ours so far have all been sitting somewhere over here, which is an inverted shackle and definitely not a good thing. But it is a common issue with short springs like the EFS ones that we've got. Once we've got all of the suspension back on and the car on 4 wheels again, we're going to try using a crowbar to uninvert them all once we've jacked up the body.
Now it's time to fit the locator pin in the spring inside the axle. Now we all know how hard it is to fit a knob inside a small hole, but this is looking especially difficult. So the only way I can think of doing this is by gently jacking up the spring and then pulling the shackle out so they line up at the perfect angle. So now I think if we pick up the axle and move it to the right slightly, at least though it'll be square on the springs, right? But she's far from the hole yet. Did you drop your side?
Yeah, it's in. I'm in.
You're in?
I'm in.
I'm not in.
I win.
I'm close to in.
Oh, you need to push the axle kind of that way, like the spring needs to come out a tiny bit, I guess. There you go.
Hey, I'm in. Feels great. Just as before, U-bolts over the axle done up nice and tight. So now we just whack on the other side's U-bolt plate, the rest of these U-bolts, and we'll leave them loose and do the shocks.
Because the wheel's off and the axle's putting all its weight on the spring, it's a lot further down than it normally would be, and the shock doesn't extend far enough to be able to put the bottom on. So we're just gonna jack up this U-bolt plate under here, pop on the shock, and then I think that's the suspension done. And there you go, all new suspension on the 60. So she's sitting up really nice and high at the moment, which is cool, but once all the weight's on, she should settle back down to about a 2-inch lift.
I'm absolutely stoked to see new parts on the car. It's been a long journey of taking stuff off and fixing things up. So to see things start to go back on is just a massive milestone, especially the suspension. Once she's heavy as well, the shackle angles should improve and we'll be able to tighten up all of the bolts on everything that I said leave loose before, because you don't want to set them in at the wrong angles or the wrong configurations. On that note, after you've driven 1,000 kilometers, or after we've driven 1,000 kilometers, we'll be retightening all those bolts again just to make sure they're sitting at the right spot, and because you really don't want to lose an axle while you're on the freeway. If you like the video, guys, as always, make sure to subscribe. Lots to do still on the 60, so stick around. Thanks for watching. Now, we all know how hard it is to fit a tiny little knob inside a big hole.